It's the art of coaching. It's not the data's problem. It's a coaching problem.
Data's not going away.
Highlight that, Spiker. Highlight that. That's it.
Let's finish it.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of The Closing Pitch. My name is Spiker Helms, and this is a show about people, culture, and how to create a winning lifestyle. Dave has a winning streak right now. This is his second show in a row.
Yes, sir.
We are on a roll, my friend.
Yes, sir, buddy. Back at it.
Seemed like we were just keep on triggering, like you couldn't get that win column consistent.
Too many days off.
But now you're here.
I'm here.
Today, guys, we have an episode with John Moscot. This is his second episode. That he would be the second guest doing a two-peat here, which is awesome. And the episode that he was in was episode 23, Change is Happening Fast. In that episode, we talked about blast motion. If people that don't know what blast motion is, it's a technology company inside the baseball space. It deals with hitting, and a lot of professional baseball players are using this technology. College players are using this, and it was more of a deep dive discovery on their company and how it's changing the baseball and softball space. And this time with this new go around with John, I was scrolling through Twitter like I normally do, and I got into a rabbit hole, and I ran across one of his tweets, and I was like, dang, John tweeted. Holy crap, what did he say? Because, again, like in the baseball space, the guys that I follow, we tweet, but we're very, what would you say, John, tactical about it?
Yeah, sometimes too much content is an overload,
We're tactical with it, and the tweet that he had that really rang a bell with me on multiple things. He said, at the batting cage the other day, I overheard a dad aggressively yelling at his son, change your launch angle, after he popped up the ball. That's not going to change his swing and not the way to go about it. Let's start with the process, and then we can focus on the result. And the first thing that popped into my head was terminology. What is going on? Like that we're speaking a different language. We have old school, we have new school, and there's a lot of human nature involved with this conversation too, because we're trying to, again, blast motion, in my opinion, is trying to create a movement, a change in the space that is going to get instructors and coaches on the same page, and there's not any, I wouldn't say any gray area, but it's more of a black and white type of conversation rather than a gray conversation. So that's the setup for this show. But before we jump into it, I want to know the origin story of John. What is your origin story? Give us your background, because it is a fascinating background.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. I love the energy every time I jump on this show, and you guys are always great. Awesome content. I'm excited for today. But that before I get into my origin real quick, that story is true. I was in the cage. Dad started yelling at his son, hey, change your launch angle, it's not going to work. And I just had to like shake my head. I almost wanted to walk over and tell the kid, hey, you're going to be all right. This is not the end of the world. And don't listen to your dad. But I didn't do that, so we'll see. Hopefully, good luck with your career, young man. And if I ever run into you again, I will definitely help you out. But for me, I went to Pepperdine University. I pitched there, and I was drafted by the Reds in 2012 in the fourth round of the amateur draft. Made it up to the big leagues in a couple of years, pitched a couple of years up with the Cincinnati Reds at the major league level. Battled injuries. I hurt my left shoulder. I hurt my right arm. I am a right-hander. It was a freak incident with my left arm. Ended up kind of derailing what was, I thought, a promising career, and I ended up retiring in 2019 at the beginning of the season, just due to overall injuries and multiple surgeries, and then I ended up diving in on the analytics side with the Reds, with dealing with the front office, dealing with kind of players and understanding the data, being a sort of, I guess they call it a liaison between, some of the data analysts and the players, where you interpret some of the information that they're basically spitting out and churning out and giving it to guys in a clear fashion where, a player can actually make a actionable adjustment, right? Because it's an overload sometimes of information, and you have to have somebody that can speak the language. So that put me in a unique position coming out of being a player and on the field, and then transitioning into a role outside of baseball. And I naturally fell into a job with Blast Motion, baseball technology, talking data. But my passion is really giving back and coaching kids and talking to development and where the game is going. So I'm excited for today to share a little bit about that, and hopefully have some cool insights for you guys.
It's tough because we're a little tough on the parents sometimes, or people that say certain things. You're like, oh my gosh, and we shake our head. And again, they only know what they know, right? So there's a certain point where when they say something, I hope they're not using it because it's a buzzword. And I feel like that's the case where launch angle is the buzzword of choice. It could be attack angle, or it could be velocity. It could be a number of different things, but knowing the terminology is the hardest part, in my opinion. It took me a while to really understand blast motion and the metrics. I first started out with ZEP. I hope you don't hate me for mentioning that business, but then I started transferring into blast and started really digging in. And after the conversations with Dave and John and the guys at Blast, it was just awesome. So my thing here is that where do you see baseball and softball education at the current moment?
Yeah, you couldn't say it better, Spiker. The buzzwords are huge. People, and they're not wrong, right? Buzzwords are not something that a parent is wrong for saying, but it's just how you use it. And I think that that's everything with data and technology, and where baseball and softball are at the current moment, right? There are people who know how to speak to it, integrate it with what they already know. And we call it the old school and new school approach. And I'm a fan of it because it does kind of define those two. But I'm not a fan of it because sometimes it puts, a negative connotation on old school. And I think that the old school approach is really just uh, somebody who's been around the game and has their own way of doing things. And that's awesome because they might have some incredible insights. So I think where baseball and softball are at right now is figuring out the best way to integrate what this new school quote unquote approach is, which is, we have all of this data and information, and how do we put it together in a clear and concise way so that kids can understand it, coaches can understand it, right? And we can use it as an organization or as a team or as a program the best possible way, while incorporating what people have come over the years of coaching that is extremely valuable in that old school approach, right? What the old school doesn't have to be, a bad thing. It's actually a great thing. It's just, can we integrate that and use that with some of the new ideas and practices that are currently evolving in the game? And I don't think that they're mutually exclusive by any means.
What do you where do you think, like in general, from an educational standpoint, where we are as a culture for baseball and softball? Because again, like you said, I'm in that boat with old school and new school. Like I get frustrated at times with the old school because again, they're stuck in their ways at times. But again, that's the same thing with a teenager fighting a parent, right? They get a little bit frustrated and they think the parent doesn't know anything, but in reality, the parent has a lot of wisdom. And from an old school perspective, there is a lot of wisdom because they did go through the experiences. They have seen 20 years of different types of players and teaching those guys and going more off of feeling than anything else. And now you have this technology that is really, it clearly states what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so the new school gets really frustrated. Like, why can't you see this? Like, this is why the guy is not doing this, or that's why the girl's not doing this. From an education standpoint, where do you think this stands for an instructor?
I think it varies, right? I think it varies with the willingness to accept information and understand, hey, what is this new technology? I think overall, in a broad scheme, I think we're making big strides, baseball and softball. I think that you're going to see less leaps maybe in some of the tech industry here in the next 3 to 5 years, as far as like, I don't think player development is going to be revamped the way that it has been over the last 5, 7 years, when you see it trickle down from the major leagues, right? Where guys have, it's completely changed the way that we valued information, we value data, and so I think that is going to slowly trickle back down to the youth level, right? Where people are going to start to understand it more, how it's utilized, But I don't think that you're going to see, a ton of new products here coming out for information purposes, right? I think that it's just going to be a matter of people getting, like you said, more and more educated. And so I think we're not quite where we need to be. I would say we're maybe about 50%, and I think that ultimately it's just going to be everybody learning kind of what this is as it becomes a normal part of the game, from the
How do
youth
we
up all the way up.
that raises a really good question for me is like, how do we end up connecting the bridge? How do we get an amateur coach to understand what a professional coach knows now on technology, or even a college coach? Because I think college has made a lot of strides in literally like 12 months. It's been unbelievable. Like you see Iowa, it seems like Rick Heller in Iowa is literally just pumping out and really engulfing himself into data. Obviously, Vanderbilt's been ahead of
Wake Forest.
Yeah, Wake Forest.
Yeah.
I mean, Vanderbilt's ahead of the curve. And then the stuff that Charlotte's doing with pitching is pretty interesting too. How do you connect that bridge to the amateur coach? Because at the end of the day, we don't want these players to come into a college program or a professional program and then they have no idea what's going on.
Spiker, that's the $1 million question, right? And I think it generally starts with a eagerness and a willingness to learn, right? When you shut yourself off to new things, regardless of how well you've done it in the past, I think that you're only doing a disservice to the players, right? As a coach, our goal should be, let's get our players to the peak possible performance level that they can be at for their age, and assuming that that's their interest, right? They want to be Major League Baseball players, or they're invested heavily in it. A coach should give the player the best opportunity to achieve their goals. And right now, I think what data is proving is that it's giving an objective measurement for players to be able to set goals, hit those goals, and then move past those goals, right? So how do we connect with the common coach? I think we just emphasize that the importance is really on the player, right? This isn't about us as coaches. It's about giving back to the players, and we're giving them the best possible way or utilization of resources and time to get to their goals.
I always wonder too, like, are we doing enough? Are we putting in the effort of actually the education side? Because, and then you have social media, and then you have a fire hose, and then it's like, well, is the guy really looking at it? Those are the type of thoughts that I'm thinking. Like, is there something else that we could do, or is there more that we can do, in your opinion, from an influential standpoint?
There's always more that we can do, right? There's always another course, right? You look at a doctor, right? Does a doctor go and say, hey, I've finished residency and I'll never go back to school? I mean, in some capacity, yes, but they have to do continuing ed classes, right? They have to take classes every year to make sure that they're staying up on what's new and what's relevant. And I think that the same applies to us as coaches, and if we're going to be in the game, right? You have to be giving yourself more time to learn, to understand new things, at least to make the informed decision to whether or not you want to use it or you don't feel that it's valuable. But to blanket statement and say that this is not something that I believe in without knowing what it is, that's where I see the issue, right? That's where I see the overall, hey, like there's, we're not in this for the player at this point. We're just in this because we're in this for ourselves. And that's I think the disconnect, and that's, to answer your question, maybe the things that we can do more. And in that, right, when we post on social media and when we send things out, right, let's be clear with what we're saying, because those buzzwords get thrown out real often. And like we talked about early on, when a parent uses a buzzword, you don't know how it's going to affect a player if you don't understand it.
I wonder if it also has to deal with like being humble on social media as well, like from an influential standpoint, and the ego kind of comes out and be like, I want to be a celebrity. And we were talking with Brandon in our last podcast. It seems like when someone jumps on social media, the first thing they want to do is, I'm here to be a celebrity. TikTok famous, right? That's the catchword right now. And 2 years ago, it was Instagram famous. I mean, everyone wants to be a celebrity. So I think that holds true in the baseball and softball space too. I mean, there's some real good people that are doing awesome things, that are there to literally, they have a side business or a real business, and then their social media is just to educate. And you can tell those people versus the people that are like, I'm all in on social media because I want to be a celebrity and I want to make money off this thing.
that's something that in our culture today is a constant battle, right? Like what's truth, what's fiction, what's social media, where do you draw the line? And and to those that are, trying to be influential and trying to be celebrities, power to you for putting it out there and getting on those platforms. But it would be awesome if everybody was the guy that was spitting content for the reason that, hey, I just value what learning and giving back. And but unfortunately, it's not. So we have to
Yeah, I'm
kind of.
trying to elevate your game. Like I'm trying to get you better.
Yeah,
Like that. I mean, that's what it really. I mean, that should be the core, right? Like, I want to elevate you. I don't want to downgrade you and think like I'm way up here because I want to be a celebrity and you're down here. Follow me.
Right.
It's like we're on the same level. We're both going there. I have this ability to get on camera and speak it and I want to give as much information as I possibly can. Like I feel like hopefully as a society we're starting to move in that direction where we can actually figure out who that person is.
And I think it kind of gets back to, like, you had mentioned a role you played with the Reds. So you were a liaison between the data analysts and the players, which is kind of like how I view, so like the tech company and the amateur player, the amateur coach. The role that you played, and I'd love for you to kind of expand on that liaison role, because that's got to be the you got to learn how to speak two unique languages there. And you got to be able to take all this tech information, this data, the way the analysts talk, because the way the analysts talk is completely different than how the players talk. And then you got players from all these different backgrounds, which is just like what we see. We have 10-year-olds we work with, 17-year-olds who are getting D1 scholarships. We have so many different guys we talk with, so many different levels of coaches. So we have to try to play that liaison role as well in terms of how do we take this information. We know Blast is good. We know these numbers are right. It's black and white, like you guys say. How in the world do we talk those numbers 25 different ways and bridge that gap?
Well, I had this conversation with one of our coaches, and he's like, "Man, I know Blast is awesome. I know it works. Like, but Spiker, I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I don't know what these numbers are. Like, I read it and I try to understand it, and I still don't understand it. And then I'm like, well, I'll explain it and everything like that. And then I think it's just it's an interaction between the two. But yeah, like go down that route. Like, how do you make that connection, John? Like, how do you view that?
Great points. I think I have a bit of a unique perspective here, as you said, David, as I've been kind of on both sides of it. And um, one of the pieces that was very valuable for me in going back into that role was that I had played, right? Like I understood being on field and being asked to do something as an athlete is not as easy as just, hey, change this, right? Like you can't just say, hey, your launch angle is too high, change it, right? Like, or your fastball needs more spin, add more spin. That to me is the problem. That's the tech problem, right? That's where coaches are right when they say, oh, data, there's problems. If it's given in that way, then it becomes an issue because you're leaving it up to a player to make an actionable choice or not a choice. They're just going to try and alter what they're doing without any idea or any direction in doing so. So what my role was really to speak to my experience as a player and being asked to do something to utilize the knowledge that I had of movement, right? If I'm a pitcher, right? What does stay back mean? That's a verbal cue that you're asked all the time, but what does that actually mean? Right? What are you feeling as a pitcher when somebody says stay back, or as a hitter when somebody says fire your hits? What are you actually feeling, right? Like what is that? Is it the joint of your hit moving forward too fast? Is it your backside actually turning and initiating the movement? Where's the pressure and the weight in your foot from the mound to home plate, right? Like those are the things that people don't think about giving as a tool as a teacher to a player when you just say those buzzwords, right? Like there is so much more to making a swing or a mechanical adjustment than, hey, change this, and that was the role that I played, right? Like if you want to increase the spin rate of a pitcher, which is very, very difficult to do, they first need to understand what that means and why you're doing it. They have to buy.
Explain spin rate. Explain spin rate really quick so that people kind of know how the context of the conversation we're in right now.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I'll relate it back to hitting too, right? If you're going to say, I'll get to spin rate in one sec, but if you're going to say, let's say like, hey, change your rotational acceleration, right? Like, or you need to keep, sequence better in your swing. Well, how do you sequence better, right? And that's where I'm getting to. So spin rate, if we're going to just put it in layman's terms, is the amount of RPMs that a baseball takes on its way to home plate, and you basically are determining if a pitcher is going to be a guy that's going to live off of a fastball that has more life to a hitter, that appears to jump at the top of the zone to a hitter, or if he's going to be a guy that's going to have more success at the bottom of the zone based on the fact that their balls spin a certain way. And if spin is like a fingerprint, so you're not talking about something that a guy who can really, really, really adjust, but it's something that a guy needs to understand and know what their strength is as an individual athlete to make the best opportunity or have the best opportunity to succeed on the mound or at home plate. And I firmly believe that part of this process, David and Spiker, getting back to what we were saying, is that you have to understand as an athlete what's being asked of you. If somebody just says, hey, change your launch angle, well, you might do it day one at practice or a weekend, and then you're going to go back to your normal stuff. Why am I changing my launch angle? What is the reasoning behind it? And then how do I do it? And I think I sent a tweet out before that, Spiker, which was, why do I do something and how do I do it? The how is probably the most important part, because that's the coach taking the information and then giving it to you in a way that makes it understandable, relatable, and actually actionable. And so there's a lot to unpack there, but I do feel very passionate about that.
And Joe jumped in, which helped a lot on that Twitter thread. He jumped in, and is he a programmer for you guys, or what does he do on
Joe? So Joe works with the event solutions with a lot of our event partners, but is very, very knowledgeable and dialed in on the product and speaking to the same things that I'm talking to right now.
He came out with a really good tweet, which was a GIF, and it showed the results and why things are important. And I think that's a huge point that needs to be said. Like spin rate. Okay, it's great that we can talk about spin rate. We can talk about how high the RPMs are, but what's the real benefit? Why should I even care about that? How does it even affect me? You know what I'm saying? And even on a hitting standpoint, someone said, like, we were working on with the Rapsodo, and one of the guys like, oh, my RPMs is at 4,000. I was like, we don't want that. That's totally different. That's totally different than pitching. We don't want 4,000 RPMs. We want less. And I think that's the disconnect too, is just what's the benefit of increasing my spin rate, or for a hitter to have a better attack angle towards the ball, or even we've talked about this in the past. Rotational acceleration is the most underutilized data point, in my opinion, when it comes to hitting. So I think it has to deal with the benefits than anything else.
Yeah, you're right. And to answer that in a clear and concise way is understanding the benefits. Basically leads you to understand your strengths. And if there's one thing at the major league level that I learned, right, in a short amount of time, it was when you try to pitch or when you try to play to somebody else's weaknesses versus your strengths, you will not succeed. You may succeed for a little bit, but you will not be as long-term successful as you will be if you play to your strengths. And knowing your strengths as a player, as a hitter, as a pitcher, that's huge, right? Understanding what you're good at, right? Like utilizing that and continuing to improve on that, and day in and day out, right? Like I'll give you an example, and this is from my own experience. I was a rookie throwing to a catcher who had some significant time, right? Who, when he threw something down, I was going to say yes. And that was just the way that it was, right? Like, and I had never been asked to throw an up and inside fastball to a left-handed hitter, right? Ever in the minor leagues. That was not a pitch that I threw. I wasn't a four-seam guy. I was a two-seam guy. And I was throwing against the Nationals, and every other hitter, all the fastballs that he was calling was up and into a left-handed hitter, right? And I was a 1-0, 2-0, and now here you go. Now here's a cookie down the middle because I'm back behind in the count. And it's like, well, if I had just stayed with what I knew I could do, right? Maybe they would have gotten some hits, but I guarantee I wouldn't have been 2-0 on every guy and hadn't given up a home run on certain swings. So like I know that that's kind of going off to the pitching side of things, but it's why I feel passionate about this. And when you get back to the spin rate conversation, what a guy if a guy knows that he's successful at the bottom of the zone, he's less inclined to say yes to that catcher and say, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to keep pounding that ball up there because that's what that guy doesn't do well. No, I'm going to do what I do well, right? If I'm a hitter and I know that I'm going to take a down and away fastball and drive it to right field, if I stay on plane with that pitch and I stay connected well through my swing, right, then I'm gonna hunt that pitch, and that's going to be something that I look for as a hitter, right? Like, and those are just things that you can take away as a hitter or as a pitcher and know that you're good at, and you can have confidence, and so again, like maybe getting off topic here, but
No, like when you were doing that, when you were in that situation, that catcher kept on calling that. Again, obviously he's a big leaguer, right? So he's got that veteran on you. Like, what were you thinking at that time? Were you just like, all right, we're just gonna roll with it? I mean, this guy knows what he's talking about, or were you kind of in the back of your head saying, "This is not a good decision. This is not a good decision. What do I do here?"
you always want to be confident in yourself, right? You always want to have that idea that you're going to get the thing done. And I would maybe just some naivete continue to throw that pitch thinking I was going to get it there, but I knew in the real life that I wasn't going to be able to put it there, 8 out of 10 times. I might get 1 out of 5, and I would just hope that that one out of those 5 was the one that was going there, right? Like, but that's not a good place to be. That's not a good spot to be in. I want to throw everything with confidence. I want to stand up there in the zone and take every swing I have with confidence, right? And because that changes the course of your your conviction and what happens on field.
And obviously, we've talked about your big league career. And what makes you unique, though, is that you also teach lessons. Like, you still go back and you give back to the game, and you're teaching lessons, which, again, you don't see a lot of big leaguers do that, former big leaguers, which is awesome to see. And then you also work on the tech side. How do you convince a new client on the buy-in? Because, I mean, you go from a lesson side, and are you using the technology? And then if so, like, how do you convince that person to, like, yeah, this is what we need to look at. This is the thing that we need to use.
I definitely use the technology, and when I'm doing it, it's more to baseline and give an idea and a representation of where a guy is or where they might be starting, and then to utilize and hone in a lot quicker on an area that we can improve. So if I use it on the hitting side, I'm using it to just identify, hey, look, like this is our weakness, right? And I know that I can see it with my eyes, but why not back it up with a source of information to say, hey, look, like here's the buy-in for you, right? Here it is. It's being told. I'm not just spewing what I think. I know this. And now by knowing this, like let's take the coaching side of it, that part of the equation, and now let's utilize the coaching and the buy-in from the player and make you better. Same thing with pitching, right? Like with understanding a Rapsodo or TrackMan data. Like now I know, okay, well, here's where you're going to succeed or what breaking ball you're going to succeed with. Let's work to get that to be its best possible shape and the best pitch that we can make it. And now we take that out into a game and instill the confidence in you to be a guy that you can be, right? So I use the data in that way. And then how do I convince someone? Honestly, Spiker, I just say that. Like that's how I'm going to use this. This is not the end all be all. It's a tool in the tool shed, and it's going to coincide with my coaching ability to say, hey, you know what? Like I'm going to give you your best chance to be the best version of you.
So you just said something that's really important. And what that is, and I'm sure you would attest to this, that you speak different terminology to different guys because everybody's different. Some guys are monsters. Some guys are small, short, speed guys. Some guys throw 95. Some guys throw with movement. Everybody's different, so certain technology and terms can be used towards different players, towards their strengths. Like you're not going to tell a leadoff guy who's a $150 who runs a 6'6" that he needs to have an upward launch angle because it's just not going to do anything for his swing. He's going to be out, and he's going to go against his strengths. So go into that real quick in terms of how you really understand the player that you're coaching first, and then bring the terms and the numbers in secondarily to then boost his strengths.
Yeah, 1,000%, David. I mean, it's like you just said, if you have a leadoff hitter, right, and this guy is quick. He's left-handed. He's the guy that's going to put the bat on the ball and beat balls out on the ground. Why would you have that guy popping up every time, right? If he's a guy who's launching or his attack angle is 25 degrees, every ball he misses, he's going to miss underneath and hit it up in the air. We're wasting that guy's skill set. You don't see D. Gordon hitting 700 pop-ups on a season to the outfield. He might hit one home run on the year because he knows that his strength is putting the ball in play on the ground, right? And I guarantee you that his attack angle is going to show that, and he makes a conscious effort to do that, right? So that's his strength, and he plays to his strength. If you've got a 3-4 hitter who has an incredible ability to drive the ball with rotational acceleration through the roof and bat speed, well, you probably don't want that guy at a 5-degree attack angle, because if he misses the ball, he's got a better chance of putting that over the outfielder's head than your leadoff guy. So knowing that as a coach is step one, right? What am I looking for with each individual player? And then if you relate it to the pitching side, right? If I've got a guy with high spin rate, I'm going to want that guy generally to throw more towards the top of the zone. And this is a whole nother conversation of how do you teach someone and talk to someone on how to do that, right? Like, because you can't go to a guy and say, hey, just throw at the top of the zone, right? Like, it doesn't work.
Right. Hey, just throw it bell high.
It's that easy. Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah. That's where, the role got, very, very interesting when I was working with 40-man guys and guys on the cusp of getting to the big leagues was, hey, let's, we got to dive in here and figure out how it best works for you. And you're right. It is figuring out for each individual player, what's the terminology that ticks for you? What is your strength and weakness? Knowing that as a coach, and then saying, how am I going to get you to repeat that? For me, and this is my style of coaching and just communication skills, I want to tell a guy, hey, look, like, at the end of the day, I'm not going to be standing with you on the mound, or I'm not going to be standing in there at the batter's box with you. So when you're there and it's fight or flight, you better have something that you can go back to when the snap of a finger and say, this is what gets me on track. And I want to give you that cue. So let's figure out what you're feeling, because if you do it once and you do it great and I say great job, I don't care. It doesn't really do anything for you. I need you to feel that great, what you did on that particular, pitch or hit or swing. That way you can relate back to it at a time when you're, when you've got 50,000 people in the stands and you don't have someone to turn to and say, hey, how do I do this? Right. So that's the most important thing of coaching for me, is giving that ability for a guy to make his own adjustments.
It's an art, right? It's a finesse. Like, coaching is an art form, and you can apply that to any industry, because if I'm working at Duffler, or what's the office? Duffler Mifflin, and I'm trying to sell paper. And that's what's so funny about that show, is that Michael's the worst leader of all time. But at some degree, like, you have to have that person to be able to teach how to sell paper, right? And being able to educate someone. And it's the same thing with being a teacher in a school. It's the art of teaching. And that's why when you have a really good teacher, you got to stick with that person, because they are so undervalued. It's crazy. And then when you have that, you can go to different heights with players, because they're tapping into something that they're not going to get anywhere else, which is it could be a desire. It could be a talent that they didn't realize that they had. It could be a soft skill. It could be a hard skill. There's so many different routes when you have a really good teacher.
Well, and to be quite frank, I think that's where most of the technology issues in the fight between tech and old school go wrong. You got all these guys who want to be all in on tech and want to spout off all these terms: launch angle, spin rate, everything, rotational acceleration.
They want to sound smart.
They want to sound smart, and they want to sound cool. And sure, does that attract kids right off the bat? Yeah, they're going to be drawn to it. They're going to see that cool box sitting on the ground or that cool thing on the end of their bat and be like, oh, yeah, dude, I want to use it. Well, let's work on rotational acceleration today, because that's going to make you Giancarlo Stanton overnight. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, hold on a second. How does that equate to me? And that's where it gets lost.
If I say velocity or power, there's like a group of people that are coming in.
Come on in.
I know.
And that's where the frustration gets. That's where I think the whole frustration in the battle lies, in the fact that you can know all of those things, but if you don't know the guy you're working with and have that relationship built up with him to truly deep dive and understand how you can communicate with them, one, what's going to help him 2, make him believe that it's going to help him 3, and then once it does start helping him, show him why it's going to continue to help him. All the tech is useless.
John, what are the best use cases that you've ever seen with technology? What are it could be pro, it could be college, it could be like even at the amateur level. If there's like a 12U group that's just crushing it with technology and doesn't have to be Blast. I mean, obviously you want to promote Blast, but just in general, what's the best use case that you've seen someone use technology?
That's a good question, man. There's quite a few instances, and this isn't a personal, like I've been there and seen it happen. But the current pitching coach for the Minnesota Twins was the coach, I believe, at Arkansas before he took the role there. And I think it's Wes Johnson. And Wes, I was working very closely with TrackMan last year, with someone very high up at TrackMan as we were kind of going through this information and just applying spin and applying a lot of the different metrics to guys. And Wes was basically recreating new ways of structuring drills and practices through the information that he was gathering. Like he would 3D print a baseball to have a hole in it so that you could throw it and work on the actual like spin and see the ball ride and rise, right? And he was doing that on.
He used a 3D printer and printed a You printed a baseball, and then it had a hole in the middle of it.
So it didn't have. So it's basically like a PVC pipe, right? But it was like the shape of a baseball, and it didn't have. It had seams on it, so you could grab the seams and you could throw it, and if it stays true, it rides and lifts up. So that's how you work on your spin. Yeah, and I mean, like, let's think about that for a second, right? You're taking an abstract idea that the more spin you add to your pitch, the better you're going to be at throwing in this particular location. We get more, proven time and time again, more swing and miss, a better chance to get out a hitter, more pitch expected run value. And he takes that idea and then, builds his own, essentially, his own idea and his own way of teaching that, and then takes guys and starts churning out guys that are pumping 95, getting drafted left and right. And then sure enough, goes and gets the big league job for the Minnesota Twins. And it's all an understanding of the information, an application of the information, and a clear and concise, hey guys, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it, right? And I haven't, had the ability to talk to him, but the TrackMan guy who I was working with, his name's Zach Day, was extremely close to Wes. They had a great relationship, and when he would tell me all these stories, and I was like, my gosh, this is amazing, And then on another note, right, on a personal level, watching Derek Johnson at the big league level for the Cincinnati Reds, I mean, seeing that guy work with pitchers, I think he was the pitching coach of the year last year and has always been in that running. The biggest thing that I can say from that standpoint is you use the data and the tech and all of that stuff to get guys out, but you instill confidence in your pitchers, because a guy that goes out to that mound and believes in his slider and believes in his fastball is going to do a heck of a lot better than a guy that's walking out there that is, has no belief in his stuff, or is just saying, I don't belong here, but let me just try and throw this, or I'm not committed to this. So, confidence, utilizing the data and the information from a standpoint of that's pitching. Spiker, if I was going to get into hitting, gosh, off the top of my head, I don't even know right now, man. I got to think on that one. I've got some because I mean, you guys use it awesome. You guys have an incredible, program that you run with the Tigers, from the youth all the way up to your higher age groups, with drill packages and leaderboards and exciting players to swing and to keep going.
I can tell you something, John, on what you just said that was really cool. Is I love the fact of how technology and numbers, when used correctly, how quickly confidence can be built with those players. That's insane to me. That's been one of the best things that any of the tech that we use, including Blast Motion, that's been the coolest thing in the world, because it's really hard as a coach to you can see, I've seen 1,000 players, more than that. So I can kind of tell, as can you and Spiker, that when you see it click for that guy, you see it, right? He might not have. He might not have even felt it. I see that all the time. I'm like, dude, that did you feel that? Like, that was it. That was the throw. That was the swing. And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess. but then you see the numbers, right? And kids are drawn to numbers. Players are drawn to numbers. And now they see those numbers jump, or they see it perform as to what they want. And now all of a sudden they're like, in their mind, they've leveled up. They're like a different dude, a different guy. And they kind of walk a little taller. They're a little bit more confident, a little bit more cocky. And that's a huge, huge thing for me.
It's similar to, like, if I could make an analogy on this, and Dave, you're probably gonna make fun of me on my analogies because of my Office comment.
I don't even know how you brought Office in after talking about
my mind was going in different directions. I was thinking paper when I was writing. Anyways, so I kind of view it like this: is like if we were pirates and we're searching for, I can't take myself seriously right now, but if we're searching for a treasure and we're out in the ocean and you're like, hey, the treasure's out there somewhere, and we're just going. Mm-hmm. That's like similar to a player. Like, he's trying to search in this vast ocean and has no idea where to go. But then if we give him that map or that compass, then he's going to be able to find that gold. Yep. He's going to be able to find that treasure. Yep. That's probably the most corny. What tech is. That's probably the most corniest analogy I've ever used. But
it's not, because it gives you a map. Yeah. It gives you real answers. That's why I've never understood the argument against it. That little device isn't fighting my game. It's not a object that I have to go around. It's simply a tool that is telling me what I'm doing. That's all it is. It's black and white numbers. And if you choose to look at those numbers and find a way of how it's going to help you as a player or as a coach, implement a plan for a player, that's all that is, and it's a great tool.
Well, I think that's the buy-in too, because whenever you try to force someone to like do it, they like fight you tooth and nail. Like, sure. I don't want to use that. But if you're able to promote and educate, and it comes back to the art of coaching, and you use it as a person and you use it in your everyday, that person's going to completely buy in. Mm-hmm. But then when you have a coach or you have someone that's completely old school, God love them, it's not going to work. And it's just trying to figure out that education side of like getting them to use it.
Yeah. And that's the enjoyment that I get out of, my current role with Blast is, I get to walk people through those initial steps of, hey, what do I do with this? How do I use it? And give them the ability to understand a whole new product and a whole new way of teaching, and then take it and make it their own, right? Like, not everybody does it the same way. You use the pirate ship analysis or analogy. I liken it to like rock climbing, right? If you're going to go to a rock climbing gym and climb up a wall, everybody takes a different route or maybe puts their hand in a different place, but you're all going for the same place. You're all shooting for the top of the wall or the top plateau, right? We're all going for the same goal. We set that goal clear in the sand, and then we use our ability to get there through our own skills and our own skill sets as coaches. So, like, for me, when I walk through this with someone who's really excited about doing it, I get a lot of reward in, seeing them, take that next step to elevate their coaching careers and then help these players get better. And you'd be surprised how many text messages I get from guys that's saying, man, we really love this. Our guys love it. It's made them have more fun at practice. We see a ton of value and are having a good experience with it. So what our COO, Roger Weingarth, always says is, more so than anything, we're an information company. Mm-hmm. We're giving you information, right? And you guys get to do whatever you will with that information, right? So that information is powerful. And, I like to be a bridge between understanding and then implementing that information.
How do you see this thing evolving in the next 18 to 24 months from the tech side? Usually at the ABCA, the year before the cerveza sickness, we had that conversation. I was like, man, where do you see this thing going? It's been a year so far. Where do you think this thing's going now?
I was thinking about that before we got on, Spiker. We jumped on about a year ago, and we're talking about what's going to happen, what's the landscape. We're talking about it potentially being used in recruiting. And all of those things are happening. You see at the last ABCA convention, we had an exposition where we talked about, as a company, colleges that are now actually recruiting on it because they aren't able to see guys. They haven't had the ability to get out and see games. So they're using it in their recruiting process. They want hard data to back up what their eyes are saying, because really anybody can take a video and send a video and look good. You know, how do you differentiate yourself between, the next guy? Or maybe they're looking for something in particular. They're looking for a guy that has a ton of sink, and they need a guy to go long, and or they need a hitter that has a ton of power because they're losing their 3-hole hitter in 2 years, and they need a guy to come in, right? Like, what are they going to look for? Well, they're going to look for a guy that has those intangibles or has those qualities that you can basically pick up through this information, whether it be hitting or pitching. So that on the recruiting side of things is, I think it's only going to continue to morph into something that is being used as the standard across the board. And then as MLB has adopted it completely, the youth is going to, it's going to be here. I see, down the road, honestly, I see this sensor for blast side of things being embedded in just about every bat, right? Like, you buy a bat, you buy a sensor, and that's just, you either use the data if you want, but you have access to it regardless of whether or not you want to. And I see that being a part of baseball moving forward with wood bats, with metal bats. I see as Hawkeye takes over MLB and all of these different, you're getting every single measurement. How quick am I to move to my right, to my left? How, what's my time, pop time as a catcher on every single throw in between innings? There's just, everything is labeled now, and whether that's a good or a bad thing, there is that information out there, and use it. I choose to have a positive view on it, and you say, let's use that to our advantage as players and as coaches, because now we can say, hey, like, we have baselines, we have ideas, and places we're starting, and we have clear, concise goals that we can draw on the sand and shoot for, and then we can say that we're there, and then set another goal, or we can say that, hey, we're not there, and then we need to work towards this, right? So, like, that's another way that you can use it, and I do think that that's where it's going.
It's hard to make that argument now that the data is too much information, in my opinion, because we can handle that as human beings. The kids are in school for a long amount of time. They have a whole bunch of information that's given to them in a single day, and they can still walk, they can still run, they can still eat, and they can still drink water, and they can still pass notes in class. And we think that they can't handle data when a fastball is coming down the lane. Come on, get over yourself. I think it's just a matter of there's confusion. Whenever we get confused, we get scared, we get fearful, and we don't want to address the situation, which is, I just don't know. And we hate saying I don't know and asking for help, because that's where it comes down to. Because whenever I use data and whenever I'm able to explain the data, I get the best results out of my players. And I will have Blast Motion sitting on the side. Like one of my guys, I saw him yesterday, Taylor, unbelievable kid. He was struggling last year, absolutely struggling. I told him to get a blast sensor. He gets a blast sensor. He hits with that every single day, and he constantly looks at his numbers at each swing. And he's made complete changes. And when he makes a bad swing, he looks at it, and he's like, hey, my rotation score is down. Okay, what do we need to correct? Oh, I need to do this with my movement. I can't accept the argument anymore that too much data is a problem.
Look, I'm with you. I think that when, in my own personal experience, again, drawing back on that, when I was with the Cincinnati Reds as a player in the minor leagues, there was no communication on data, right? They collected data. We all knew it, but we didn't know how it was being used. As a player, right, at the youth age, or at a, at an academy or high school, wouldn't you want to know how someone's evaluating you? I did as a player. I wanted to know what somebody was looking for. I wanted to know what the information meant and where I could make those improvements. So maybe not even from from a side of like, I'm going to use this and get better. I just wanted to know what the heck it was that I did well, what I could do better, and what somebody else wanted to see from me, so that if I wasn't doing it, I could make those improvements. And they never gave it to me, right? So when I retired, I was kind of, I averse to the information. And that's why I can relate to those people who have that feeling and like don't want to look at the information or tech and say it's too much information. It's really, and I hate to say this and be blunt about it, it's an insecurity that it's going to be something that you don't know.
It goes back to the buzzword argument where when a player's not producing the result that the coach wants, and he's like, oh, he's thinking too much about the data. It's like, well, are you communicating effectively? Is it more of the coach's problem than the player's problem? Because you're not communicating effectively. You're just saying, oh, your launch angle's messed up. Oh, this rotation score, I'm looking at it. It doesn't look right. Blast says that it should be this number and it's this number. You need to correct that rotation score. Then the player's like, oh man, I got to correct that rotation score. And he's trying to hit a fastball. So I think it's it's the art of coaching. It's not the data's problem. It's a coaching problem.
Data's not going away.
Highlight that, Spiker. Highlight that. That's it.
That's the show right there, right? Just summed it up right there.
I mean, listen, data and tech is not going away. It is only going to get better and better and better and better. And more of it's going to become available because there are way smarter people out there than me and you out there creating that.
Without a doubt. Listen, I mean, it's going to gulf it up. It's going to engulf it.
They are looking for ways to explain why certain players are able to do certain things that help certain teams win and win and win and win and win. And that's never going to stop. So the people that are going to continue to win are going to be the people who understand how to take those numbers, that great tech, that great information, and do what you do, John. Take it to the baseball players and tell them exactly how and why this is going to help them and build that relationship to do it. Those are the guys that are going to win. Tech isn't going anywhere. It's going to get better and better.
How do you get a coach to start speaking that language?
Now, that's a harder question. I mean, you have to, again, go back to the why, right? The why. And why are you doing this? And I think that all the reasons that we've laid out today, for, the player's own sake, for the ability to easily, clearly make an assessment on a player and then decide where we can actionably improve them, right? Objective goals, objective data, all of those things are reasons why. Now, convincing a coach who may not feel that data is important lies in the coach wanting to learn the information on their own, right? Like I can tell you all of the reasons why data is valuable, why data is important, why data should be used, and when used properly you can't do it any better. But there will always be people that say that, hey, you know what, I can do it better without it. And you know what? Maybe they can, right? I'd be honestly, I'd love to see it. But maybe they can, right? And so, to each their own. If I'm going to tell a guy that says that, to use, I don't want to use data, or I want to do it my way. My question would be, why? My question is why, right? Like, why do you want to do it your way? Is it because it's worked for forever? Or is it because you're not willing to at least explore something new? And I go back to that doctor, going back for continual education, right? Like what if let's say Frank Jobe goes in for his first Tommy John surgery, and I forget the year, in the 70s maybe it was, or something like that. And Frank Jobe does a double loop on the Tommy John surgery, and it takes Tommy John 18 months, I think it was, to get back to full pitching. We're now in a place where we can do that surgery and get a guy back in 10 months. I've seen it in 9 months, right? Like now, why? Because stuff has gotten better, right? People have gotten better at their craft, and they've gotten better at doing it. And that's the same thing when using this data. It's trial by fire, error, taking the information, utilizing it, and making it clearer, more concise, and an easier process for players to learn. I just think that it's an invaluable way of using something that is now at our fingertips, and then integrating it in what we already do well. It can only make a guy who said he's old school and doesn't want to do it better.
It goes back to, like, obviously you have to have passion for it, but also being a ferocious learner and like wanting to learn so much and try to test it and try to figure it out, because that's the only way that you can figure out the Tommy John surgery and make it 9 months rather than 18 months or whatever the time frame was, right? Because that's a long time frame. 18 months, like you are literally sitting on a couch doing absolutely nothing. But now when we have 9 months, that's literally a winner. And now I'm back onto the field.
It just goes, it goes into the trial by fire, like, work it, do it, see it, get it better. And that's what the data provides, is like, hey, we have 120 million swings in our system or plus. We know what kind of works and what doesn't. Like, let's use that to our advantage.
John, do you have an example? I'm going to kind of put you on a spot here because it's a question I've had ever since you said this at the start. When you were with the Reds and you were being that liaison from the data analyst talking about all these numbers, and I'm sure they probably said, we have our favorite guys out here in the system that we know if they do this, and this, it's going to project them to where we think they can get to. Do you have an example of when you had to take that information to a guy who was maybe stubborn to technology and adjustments? And if you did, how did you talk to that guy and get him to buy in?
It's not just coaches, right? You got a guy who's pitched in the big leagues before, and you got to go and tell him, I was younger than that guy. I was, didn't have as much service time as that guy. And I got to go tell him what to do on his slider. Right? Put yourself in those shoes. Like that's hard to do. Right. So like in that situation, my communication with that guy, the process of which I started that initial, hey, look, like, I know how good your breaking ball is. The Reds know how good it is. But if we can get it to these parameters, you will not be here in AAA. Right? It's not a hey, like, it's not a question. It's literally, if we can make this consistently here, you will never be back here. Right? And it was like, oh, well, I'm just this or I'm just that. And there's excuses that come in, and, there's all kinds of different things, but clear in the sand, if we can repeat ourselves, or we can repeat this pitch to this parameters, and this is exactly what you do, right? Like, you throw it this many times and you do it this well, you're going to be in the big leagues and you're not going to be back here. And so it took some time, right? It took some time to figure out, okay, what are we going for? What do I actually mean when I say, 14 inches of horizontal break and 2 inches of vertical break and, an 8 o'clock spin direction or a 9 o'clock spin direction, right? Like, different terms. And then it takes the ability of that guy to then take, slow motion footage, mechanical analysis, in-game data capture, right? Like, put it all together with me and say, let's now pick apart the piece of this that when you're in a big league game and you lose your breaking ball, you get it back in one pitch, right? Like, what's your cueing, right? And I want you to have that, so that when, because you have it sometimes, you clearly had it for 5 years and now it's not there. So let's get it back and let's figure out what it was and make it stick. And it was very, very rewarding for me to go back and see that guy now back there and doing well, at the major league level. And like, it was hard. Like, it was very hard to have that initial conversation and to have that conversation with guys. But
convincing someone that is like, they're on the brink of Major League Baseball, right? And we've all been around the guy that comes out of AAA baseball, and he's done, and he comes into a baseball facility and he thinks he knows everything, right? It's that young and naive. And there's some instructors here that are really good at what they do. It's hard to convince that guy to change something because he's gotten to that level.
Oh yeah. Well, it's even harder to convince a guy who's had success and keeps beating his head in the ground because he knows he's had success and he's trying to figure out what it is that he had before, right? Like, you'd think sometimes it'd be easier because they're willing and open to learn, but a lot of times they're like, no, I've done it. I know how to do it, and don't talk to me about it, right? And so there's always, you just like David, you said it earlier, you just got to know who you're dealing with. You've got to know the player, you've got to know their personality, their strengths, their weaknesses, and you really got to know the content. Because if I went to that guy and I BS'd it and I didn't know what I was talking about, I'd have lost him in a second.
But I mean, let's just say like that situation, if tech doesn't exist, and we know, of course, let's say, yeah, you can get that slider to break that much harder, that much later, etc. Of course, we can be like, yeah, that's going to get more outs. You're never going to be back here again. But if you don't have tech to back that up, if you don't have visuals, a slow motion analysis, all that information that now tech companies are bringing to the table, dude, that guy doesn't listen to you. No chance. He's going to be like, yeah, dude, nice pipe dream. Yeah, and if I throw 105, I'll never be back here either. Good call. Thanks. Duh.
Exactly.
You mentioned recruiting when we were talking about tech and where you saw it 12 to 18 months from now. How do you view recruiting right now from your perspective as, again, coming from the big leagues, being a guy that teaches baseball players and also selling a product that is very hot right now? How do you view recruiting?
It's a very fluid situation with the state of the world and COVID right now, right? I think you said it was the cerveza virus earlier. I love that.
Because I don't want them to mark this podcast with the wrong thing. You know what I'm saying? There's been a lot of issues with banned videos and stuff like that. So
I know. I didn't even realize that, but that makes sense. And I love that. The state of recruiting is, I still think it's evolving, right? Like, I think it's always going to be evolving. What's the best way to bring a guy in that that benefits our program? And one thing that really does get lost in translation, honestly, to me at least, and this is like seeing it at the professional level and even at the college level with guys like playing college ball, and is really the personality side of things, right? Like, and I know we're talking about tech and this is a little bit off topic, but you know, when you see a guy come in, you can pretty much tell in a week if that guy is going to be successful or not. Honestly, whether it's pro ball or college ball, or I don't know about high school if they're a little young and maturing, but like, you really can. And that has a lot to do with their personality and their work ethic. And I think that that is something that, at least I hope, my hope is that that is something that is expounded on here in the future, somehow, some way of understanding the player and the individual that's behind the talent, right? Because that, to me, like, plays such a big role. I've seen so many guys who are so talented not even sniff the big leagues because of that reason, right? Or not even sniff the field on a college team because of that reason holding them back. And I don't know how it's evaluated. I don't know what that process is. It might even be something that's rebranded and as a stigma of mental health, where a player is in their confidence level and whatnot. I think that's going to become more of a part of the draft process, the recruiting process, and then to get back to our conversation point here, tech. I just think Spiker is going to keep going, man. I don't think it's stopping. I think more, everyone's going to have information. When a guy looks at you, it's going to be like velocity, right? No pitching coach comes out, watches a guy throw and doesn't say, hey, at the end of the day, like, I'd like to at least go back to my coach with hey, this is a right-hander who's 6'4", he's 88 to 90. Right? Like, that's part of you write it up on a guy, right? It's going to be the same thing with tech. It's going to be, yeah, this guy, he's got 75 mile an hour bat speed with, a 10 G's of rotation, and he hit 4 balls out during the game. Well, now we have a reason to say, hey, let's sign off on $50,000 a year for this player.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. You made it to the big leagues, and I don't think a lot of people ask this question, and I'm actually very curious about it on my end. Is what was your daily routine? I don't want to talk about like you being in the big leagues and your daily routine. Like, oh yeah, like I woke up and then they gave me meal money with like 5 G's in it and literally bought steak dinners all the time. I don't want to know that, but I want to know the daily. What was your daily management? Like, how'd you manage your day going into trying to make it to the show? And you can go all the way back to high school, go to college, and going into minor league baseball. And I want to know how it evolved. That's what I really want to get to.
I often say that if I was drafted out of high school, I would not have made it. And the reason for that is I didn't have a work routine. I didn't have a routine, really. That was it. Like that was the biggest thing that I learned in college. And I'll thank my college pitching coach, John Strauss, for that. And he gave me something that I could stick to. And whether or not it was the best plan in the world, it didn't really matter, because every day I knew that no matter what I did the day before, whether I gave up 18 runs or I threw a perfect game, I was going to be out working out, doing my run, getting my lift in, doing my throwing program, and staying on a regimented workout and routine every day. And that stayed with me from the day that I entered to Pepperdine University. Because at the high school level, I was all over the place. I'd play catch one day, I just didn't know. And when I got to college, I got a regimented workout routine, a solid 5-day throwing program. Actually, it was 7 days at the time, which I turned it into with the strength and conditioning coordinators with the Reds, a 5-day routine as I got to pro ball. And I literally did that every day. People would look at me like I was nuts when it was 110 degrees in Jacksonville, Florida, and 100% humidity, and I was out running for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever it was. But it just didn't matter, right? And I think that to me was the difference maker and the separator between guys that ended up making it, and guys that didn't, is the guys that just, no matter what you do or what happens, like, you have a plan and you have a routine. And it's not always, guys, to be completely honest with you, and this is the cold hard truth, it's not always the most talented player that makes it. It's not, right? This is a huge reason why it's not, because a lot of times guys will just, a war of attrition. If you're doing your work and you're getting things done, and you have something that kind of keeps you going every day, you're not the guy out partying until 3 a.m. and you're not, you have to get stuff done. Like,
Well, you see it. I mean, you see it in NAIA baseball. The best talent is not at the D1 level. I mean, it's spread out. It's the D1 level, or whatever level you want to think about. It's like you said, it's a war. It's a battle. It's who's the last man standing. I always think of Gladiator when it comes to it. Are you not entertained? It's being able to stay in the middle of the arena and stare at the crowd and be like, "You're not in here. I am, and I'm the last man standing." And I feel at the college Division I level, that's what you see it at its prime time in Omaha.
yeah,
I think about that Coastal Carolina cat who was 5 foot.
The dude who's
6.
Here.
No, not that. Well, that guy too.
Guy?
I mean, Coastal Carolina had all those dudes, but the little guy that had the beard and stole second base for LSU and ended up winning the ball game to get him to Omaha, and then he makes the unbelievable throw in the last game against Arizona and wins the ball game. That guy's not the most talented guy. That person shouldn't have been in left field at that time. That should have been some dude that probably got out of because of grades, and he's at an NAI school watching that dude be taking his dream.
Yep.
Without a doubt. It happens all the time. From a serious standpoint with you on your career, when did you make the decision that I'm gonna go pursue this? I'm going to go pursue the professional route.
So that's a hard question, because I mean, I always wanted to play pro ball, right? I think everybody wants to go play in the big leagues. That was my dream as a kid. I was always the hardest worker, and I know that that's a cliche comment, but I really was. Like, I was always the guy that was, I was first when we were doing running, when I was the guy that guys would mother F because, I was doing stuff at 5 a.m. and they weren't. And it was just that was who I was. And I think this is a very clear, not I think, I know this is a very clear memory in my mind. I was a sophomore and I was driving home from Pepperdine with my mom, and I got a phone call, or actually I was talking to my mom, and she had asked me, she said, "What are you going to do after college?" because I had finished the season. I was a sophomore at Pepperdine. I had like a 4.5 ERA with like, 80 innings as a starter, and just didn't have a very good year, right? Like it was okay, but it wasn't like this guy's going to get drafted by any means. And I'm very practical and reasonable in knowing like, okay, this is going to happen or this is not. Like I'm not naive to a lot of that stuff, right? And that's maybe a fault of mine in being objective through the course of my career. But I was telling her, I was like, well, after this year, I don't think I'm going to get drafted. I'm going to go this summer. I'm going to have a good time in Cape Cod and play. I was, I had gotten an opportunity to play over there, and then I'll get into, econ, which was what I was majoring in. And so I go out to Cape Cod, and guys, I don't know, something clicked. I did really, really well, and I figured something out at that time. Mechanically, I led the Cape in strikeouts that year. And I wasn't an overpowering guy. I was 88 to 90, right? Like right-hander. So I wasn't the 97 guy. Like it wasn't velo. I just like learned how to pitch against really good hitters. And I came back in my first game in the fall series at Pepperdine. There was about 50 scouts in the stands watching me throw. And at that moment in time, like until that point, I was like, this is not going to happen to me. And I was like, all right, this is happening. You know what I mean? So I think there was a time period there in my life where I was like, yeah, you know what? Like I'm going to continue to pursue this and work hard at it. But like, if it doesn't work out, I have a backup plan. And that's school and education. And then when I realized like, hey, you know what? Like I'm playing against the best and I'm doing really well. Now is the time. And that clicked for me when I saw those scouts that this was actually real and something real could happen. And it never changed. Like my work ethic didn't change. Nothing changed. It was just that realization, like in my mind, that this is something that actually can take place. And for whatever reason, whether it was because I was always passed over at the high school level, I went to a junior college, had to pitch my way into Pepperdine. I just didn't think it was going to happen to me.
It goes back to that gladiator standpoint. You just kept on getting back into the ring and just keep on battling and slaying people.
Just grinding, man. I love that.
Yeah,
term, grind.
And then just looked at the scouts and said, "Are you not entertained?"
I can't wait to hear how many more analogies you bring to the table.
I got them all in my back pocket here. We're continuing this.
I love it.
Going to more of a personal level, what's your biggest interest right now? Like, what are you really deep diving into on a personal level, and then also on a business level?
This may not be the answer you're looking for, but my wife and I did just buy a house, and I am.
Congrats.
Hell yeah, nice.
Yeah, I am all in on the home improvement stuff right now, Spiker. So, I'm getting down and dirty with some electrical stuff and some painting and drywall cutting and all this stuff. So we're doing some of that, yeah. And then on a business standpoint, I just continue with Blast to have awesome conversations with our clients, with new people, explore. My goal, and this is a personal goal within the company, is to bring Blast to an international stage, right? Like let's get it throughout the whole world. Let's take it over to Japan and other leagues in Australia and down in the Latin Americas, and continue to grow technology throughout the world, because it's not stopping here in the United States.
Without a doubt. Well, John, as well as I do, there's a closing pitch to each episode. So at this time, I want to do some closing pitches, and then we'll close out the show. Before we do that, guys, please subscribe to the show. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts. You have no idea how much that helps us. And I love the text messages. I love the emails. But guys, what really helps me, that gives me fuel. Don't get me wrong. That gets me fuel. But what really helps us is if you give us the reviews, because I know that this is a top level podcast and you guys are making this a top level podcast. Let's put it back on the board and put it in writing and get it on the ledger and say, yeah, this is definitely a podcast that people need to listen to. And that goes back to the listener base that we have right now, because you guys are awesome. Dave, go ahead and go with the closing pitch. Then we'll go with John, and then I'll close it out.
Yeah, so my closing pitch is always when we have a guest on, I really enjoy learning from what the guest brings to the table. And, we talked tech, John. We talked about your career, your path. We talked about, to me, the coolest part was hearing that you were a liaison from the data analyst to the baseball players. And my pitch would be, when utilizing this type of technology and information, which I'm a big info guy, like I want to know what is black and white and what can help me succeed and what can help me not succeed. And learning how to be creative with how you communicate all that great information, to me, is the most important thing going out there. That's where I think so many people go wrong with technology, and they just start blasting off different terms. Like in the first tweet we talked about, launch angle. I can just see that dad going one day, 22. We want 22, not 21, 22. That's degrees. But anyhow, I just want to learn how to communicate it, learn the player you're talking to, and then tech is just there to help, man. That's all it is, and I love the conversation.
John, you're up, man.
David, couldn't say it better, man. I think with the closing pitch for the episode, thank you guys for having me on. I know everybody at Blast, we appreciate working with you guys. You guys do it awesome. You run it right. And then just from my own personal side, I think, and like you said it, David, you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish. And in doing that, you need to know the content a little bit. So take the time and take the 5 minutes it takes or 10 minutes it takes to kind of watch a YouTube video or to sit down and talk to somebody about it that might know a little bit more than you, because as scary as it is, at the end of the day, it's going to be the most valuable thing for you professionally and for your players in their careers. So learning the why we would want to accomplish something and how to translate it to a guy is, that's the gold. And that's where I think the game is going to constantly evolve, and there are going to be good teachers and there are going to be great teachers. And then, there's always going to be room for improvement for both sides of the game, coaching and playing. And it's just exciting to be a part of it and continue to push the envelope and push it forward.
I recently did an interview with one of our Pittsburgh directors, and he does a really good job at trying to test his knowledge, and he tries to surround himself with people that are able to test him. And he always does like a bird's eye view before he starts spitting out information. And we were talking about different social channels and everything like that. And this podcast that we talked about really summed it up for me, which is, it's the art of coaching. It's the art form of being able to communicate and using different tools. And John, your ability to really help explain the technology side and giving a perspective that's very unique, I think adds another layer to this education side that, for me as a coach, being able to communicate more effectively, whether that is communicating with a coach one-to-one or with me communicating to players individually or one-to-many. So I really appreciate you coming on. This has been an awesome experience. I know that our listeners, if you guys have gotten a lot of knowledge from this episode, hit us up on DMs. Send me an email, spiker@rawlingstigers.com. Dave is dburkby@rawlingstigers.com. And John, before we close everything out, go ahead and, if they can reach out to you, where can they follow you? Where do you, if email is a little bit better, give them your email address, whatever you want to plug, go ahead and do that right now.
Yeah, guys, I will be honest. And you said it, Spiker, earlier. I don't, tweet a whole lot. I don't, post a whole lot on Instagram. But when I do, I try to make it something that counts. And it's my Instagram is Johnny_Moss, no H. My Twitter is Johnny Moscot, JONNYMOSCOT. And if you guys would have a personal or a question for me that maybe you want answered, my email, you can reach me at my Blast email. That's a great one to get me at. It's jmoscot, MOSCOT @blastmotion.com.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Guys, again, remember, subscribe to the show. Make sure that you write a review on Apple Podcasts. This is a show about people, culture, and how to create a winning lifestyle. We'll see you in the next episode.
See you guys.
Thank you for watching or listening or both to The Closing Pitch. If you would like to get your closing pitch featured on the show, we use a podcasting app called Anchor, where you can submit your statement or question via audio. Or what you can do is comment in the comment section of this post. We also accept direct messages. Please give us the A-OK if you do send us a DM to use your statement or question on the show. Last thing, please give us a review on your platform of choice. 5-star preferably, and we value your opinion, and this allows us to reach more people. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.